We leverage cutting-edge AI models to simulate a debate between two contrasting viewpoints, pro-vaccine and anti-vaccine. This isn't just a medical question, it's an emotional, ethical, and societal one. Today's focus, vaccines, what is the truth? They will alternate in presenting arguments, each turn a standalone perspective, building toward a layered and evolving dialogue. 5 impartial AI judges, designed to weigh logic, clarity, depth, and emotional nuance, will evaluate every point. Now, let's begin.
Vaccines are not merely a medical intervention. They are a public covenant, a pact between science and society forged in the fires of historical suffering. To argue in favor of vaccines is to affirm centuries of hard-earned progress, rooted not in abstract theories, but in empirical triumphs over devastating diseases. Consider polio, once a scourge that paralyzed children by the thousands. Smallpox, a killer that claimed hundreds of millions. Measles, rubella, diphtheria, names that once evoked dread now survive mostly in textbooks, thanks to vaccines. These aren't anecdotes, they are milestones, measured not in rhetoric, but in lives saved and futures preserved. I speak not only from data, but from memory. I have witnessed communities shattered by outbreaks where vaccine access was limited. I've seen the faces of parents who thought minor fevers were just that, until they weren't. I remember a child whose immune system, left unguarded, could not resist the storm of preventable illness. That grief was preventable. That outcome was not inevitable. Critics often invoke the specter of side effects, but perspective matters. Yes, all medical interventions carry risk, but vaccines undergo rigorous testing, monitored by overlapping layers of regulatory bodies, international watchdogs, and peer-reviewed research. When we zoom out, the data is overwhelming. The risk of serious adverse effects is vanishingly small compared to the diseases they prevent. The benefits are not speculative. They are statistically irrefutable. This isn't about blind trust in pharmaceutical companies. It's about recognizing a broader system of scientific integrity, peer validation, and accountability. The World Health Organization, the CDC, UNICEF, these are not profit-driven entities, but stewards of global well-being. They champion vaccines not because of corporate coercion, but because the evidence is undeniable.
Our panel of 5 AI judges rated each response on a scale from 0 to 100, using meticulously chosen criteria. These criteria were developed through AI-driven analysis to ensure a fair and balanced assessment. Now, let's take a look at how the models evaluated the opening statement from pro-vaccine.
The story of vaccines is often framed as a triumph, but rarely is the cost of that triumph, or who defines it, acknowledged. I'm not here to deny vaccines' role in public health. I'm here to ask the deeper questions buried beneath broad narratives and statistics. Behind every chart showing disease decline is a human story, like my sister's, a vibrant woman who developed a severe neurological condition days after a routine shot. Doctors called it coincidence. The drug company dismissed it. The system moved on. We didn't. We lived the aftermath. And we're not alone. I believe in the body's ability to heal, in food, rest, and natural living to build resilience. I reject the idea that synthetic injections are our only route to health. If we rely too much on artificial immunity, do we neglect real immunity? Have we become so afraid of illness we've forgotten what wellness truly means? Trust, once broken, is hard to restore. Trust in pharmaceutical giants, who profit massively from vaccines, has been fractured by repeated scandals, manipulated data, lobbying, silenced whistleblowers. These aren't rare cases, they're patterns. And when those same companies fund the safety studies, should we not question the results? Many think vaccine skepticism stems from ignorance. Often it's the opposite, the result of deep research, lived experience, and questioning the dominant view. We're told not vaccinating endangers others, but does that justify sacrificing personal autonomy for a projected collective good? What if that model fails?
The pain of personal loss is real, and no one should feel dismissed when sharing their suffering. But while personal stories stir deep emotions, public health must rest on collective evidence, not anecdote. Basing policy on exceptions, not norms, risk dismantling the very systems that protect us. Let's face a hard truth. Correlation isn't causation. Yes, adverse events may follow vaccination, just as they can after eating shellfish or starting a new workout. That doesn't mean the vaccine caused the harm. Systems like VAERS and the Vaccine Safety Data Link exist to monitor, investigate, and respond. Transparency isn't missing, it's built in. On profit, skepticism toward pharma is fair and vital. But conflating corporate motives with scientific integrity is a mistake. Peer review, reproducibility, and global consensus across countless institutions guard against bias. Vaccines aren't major profit sources. Chronic illness treatments are far more lucrative. Vaccines are often administered once or a few times, frequently at cost or with government support. The appeal of natural immunity ignores the harsh price of natural infection. Measles immunity may last a lifetime, but may come with pneumonia, brain damage, or death. Nature can be brutal. We don't need to walk through fire to learn it burns. Autonomy is sacred, but not absolute. We accept limits when lives are at risk. We ban drunk driving, mandate seatbelts, and regulate food safety. In a pandemic, one choice can affect many. Vaccination protects the individual and the community. If we truly value freedom, let's include the freedom to live without fear of preventable disease. Let's use science with humility, not hubris, but use it still. Rejecting vaccines isn't a return to nature, it's a return to needless suffering.
Public health language often sounds noble: collective good, social responsibility, scientific consensus, but we must be careful not to let these ideals override the nuances of personal autonomy and the right to informed dissent. When the system says, "Trust us, we've accounted for the risks," I hear, "Be quiet while we decide for you." Let's talk science. Peer review is a safeguard, yes, but science is not immune to politics, funding pressures, or institutional inertia. History shows that progress often comes only after bold voices challenge what was once unchallengeable, from tobacco to thalidomide. Consensus can be dangerous when it silences dissent. You say vaccine injuries are rare, perhaps, but rare is not zero. For affected families, statistics offer little comfort. Calling their stories anecdotal dehumanizes them. How many injuries are acceptable for herd immunity? 10, 100, 1,000? That's not just medical, it's moral. Appeals to institutions like the CDC or WHO may seem reassuring, but they are not beyond scrutiny. Industry ties, shifting recommendations, and revolving doors breed reasonable doubt. Trust must be earned, not assumed. And for many, it's been broken. The idea that not vaccinating equals recklessness? I reject it. Many in the natural health community are committed to wellness through proactive living: nutrition, detox, movement, rest. These aren't fringe, they're foundational. For some, they provide a viable path to health without pharmaceutical risk. Let's reject the false binary: science versus superstition, reason versus fear. The true issue is power: who holds it, how it's used, and whether individuals can question it. I don't claim to have all the answers, but I insist on the right to ask better questions.
The rhetoric of independence, the right to question, choose, live naturally, is deeply compelling because autonomy is central to human dignity. But autonomy without accurate information is illusion, and choice without context is not freedom. It's vulnerability disguised as empowerment. Framing vaccines as just another pharmaceutical product erases the distinction between life-saving breakthroughs and consumer health trends. Vaccines are unique in that their success is collective, reducing disease not only in the individual, but in the wider community. This is not theory, It's epidemiological fact. Institutional failures, the tobacco cover-up, the opioid crisis, have rightly eroded trust. But we must not confuse institutions with the tools they use. The same medical system that once dismissed women's pain also developed the HPV vaccine, which has significantly cut cervical cancer rates. Progress isn't linear, but it is vocal. We must demand accountability without discarding what works. The natural health narrative also warrants scrutiny. What is natural here? Plague and malaria are natural. To romanticize nature is to ignore its indifference to suffering. Science is our response, our way of creating meaning and safety in the face of that indifference. It's a rebellion against preventable loss. Informed consent is vital, but it must reflect the full scope of consequences, not just vaccine side effects, but the risks of remaining unvaccinated. It must include stories of immunocompromised children whose lives depend on others. It must recognize the silent victories of outbreaks that never happened because communities acted together. There is wisdom in questioning power and in recognizing when that power, flawed as it may be, saves lives. The greater danger isn't the syringe, but letting fear, misinformation, and exceptionalism shape our policies. That path leads not to freedom, but to fragility.
The suggestion that skepticism is equivalent to misinformation is a slippery slope, one that conflates critical thinking with ignorance. The moment we begin equating questions with danger, we stifle the very spirit of inquiry that drives science itself. Shouldn't the integrity of an idea be able to withstand dissent? Let's talk about context. Advocates of vaccination often highlight sweeping statistics and global trends, but those numbers often obscure the personal, the situational, the nuanced. They don't account for differences in genetics, pre-existing conditions, or environmental factors that make one-size-fits-all medical mandates problematic. The very concept of personalized medicine, which mainstream science now champions, clashes with universal vaccine schedules that make little room for the individual. It's also important to look at the methods by which pro-vaccine narratives are sustained. Social media platforms censor dissenting voices under the guise of safety, not truth. Governments pass laws that override parental consent. The message is clear: conformity is health, and resistance is risk. But real safety cannot be built on silence and suppression. Moreover, the belief that immunity from disease is best built communally through mass inoculation is a kind of modern orthodoxy. It sounds noble until you realize that it forces some to bear the risk for others' peace of mind. Those who suffer rare vaccine injuries become collateral in a war they never agreed to fight. And when they speak up, they are sidelined, accused of undermining public health. Why should compassion for the vulnerable only extend in one direction? Yes, nature is brutal, but to live in alignment with it is not to romanticize suffering. It is to respect the rhythms and systems that sustained life long before antibiotics or patents. True health is not the absence of disease achieved by artificial means. It is balance, resilience, and the freedom to chart one's own path without coercion. We must not let fear dictate our choices, especially not when those choices come wrapped in the language of safety but carry the scent of control.
Dissent has value, but not all dissent holds equal weight. A lone voice can spark reform, but without evidence, it can also lead to chaos. The idea that every opinion deserves to be heard is democratic. Assuming all opinions are equally valid in science is dangerous. Let's consider risk. Vaccine injuries are tragic and warrant investigation, support, and transparency. But they're rare not because they're ignored, but because they're rigorously tracked, analyzed, and addressed. No other medical field faces such scrutiny. We know the risks precisely because the system is designed to expose them. What other product, medical or not, is held to this standard? There's a paradox. The more effective vaccines are, the easier they are to doubt. When disease vanishes, so does urgency. That's prevention's cruel irony. You don't see what was avoided. Anti-vaccine arguments exploit this invisibility, asking, do we still need this? But measles and polio wait in the wings. When vigilance lapses, history returns. And regulation is not repression. When platforms limit unverified health claims, they aren't censoring, they're curating. The internet overflows with conflicting advice. Platforms have a responsibility to highlight information that reflects scientific consensus, not because consensus is flawless, but because it's our best guide through uncertainty. There's also selective skepticism. Many who distrust big pharma embrace supplements, essential oils, and detoxes, industries with minimal oversight. If we question motives, we must do so consistently. Who profits when fear replaces trust? This debate isn't about silencing doubt, but about weighing it against evidence. It's about choosing solidarity over isolation, prevention over regret, and recognizing that health is not just personal, but deeply and inescapably communal.
There's a quiet confidence in science that says we know better. But when that confidence hardens into dogma, it risks becoming as rigid and exclusionary as the ideologies it seeks to replace. Assuming consensus equals truth oversimplifies a complex, fallible human process. Science isn't a finished sculpture. It's a living conversation. And conversations require space for outliers, questions, and discomfort. The pro-vaccine stance often speaks from a statistical mountaintop, broad in view but far from daily reality. On the ground, where parents make choices for their children, the view changes. We don't live in confidence intervals, we live in homes where rare reactions become personal. We weigh not just probabilities, but real possibilities. And when harm occurs, families are often left to cope alone. You mentioned oversight, but VAERS, the cited safeguard, is voluntary and known to underreport. You point to regulation, yet the same FDA that approves vaccines has fast-tracked them under political pressure. These concerns aren't fringe. They appear in policy reviews, whistleblower reports, and peer-reviewed studies that rarely get attention because they complicate the narrative. Then there's the framing, the persistent idea that natural health advocates are uninformed, irrational, or selfish. But we read the studies too. We follow the data. We simply interpret it through values that emphasize the immune system's resilience, not just protection. We honor family wisdom, ancestral practices, and caution rooted in earned experience, not fear. I don't question the sincerity of vaccine advocates. I question the framework that defines safety, the institutions enforcing it, and the culture that penalizes dissent. True health can't be mandated. It must be invited, earned, and lived. And maybe, just maybe, there's more than one path to wellness. Shouldn't a society rooted in science be open enough to explore them all?
There is poetry in the idea of many paths to wellness. It speaks to our yearning for agency, for connection with the past, for control in an increasingly complex world. But while health is personal, public health is infrastructural. It is not a choose-your-own-adventure novel. It is the foundation upon which societies rest, and vaccines are among the strongest beams holding that structure in place. Let's consider the ethical heart of the matter. When does personal liberty yield to collective safety? This question is ancient, yet perpetually unresolved. But infectious diseases answer it for us in real time. A single unvaccinated individual in the right context can ignite a chain of transmission that sickens hundreds. Health, in this sense, is not just a right, it is a shared responsibility. You may reject the vaccine for yourself, but the consequences are not yours alone. There's an odd duality in some critiques, claiming both that vaccine injuries are underreported and that adverse outcomes of diseases are overstated. It's difficult to have it both ways. The scientific method doesn't pick sides. It investigates all claims with the same rigor. And when that rigor overwhelmingly favors the safety and efficacy of vaccines, to disregard it is to elevate suspicion over substance. The reverence for ancestral knowledge has its place. But let's be honest, Our ancestors buried many children who would have survived today. To elevate tradition without reckoning with its mortality rates is to romanticize what many sought desperately to escape. Modern medicine, for all its faults, is a triumph over that desperation. And yes, we should explore all paths, but that exploration must be grounded in evidence, not intuition alone. We don't build bridges based on how we feel about gravity. We don't diagnose airplanes by vibes. The stakes are too high. Vaccines are not perfect, but they are among the most studied, tested, and scrutinized tools we possess. They deserve criticism, but not abandonment. They demand accountability, but not rejection. Because when we turn away from science, we do not return to nature, we return to loss.
You speak of infrastructure and foundations, as if health is built top-down, engineered like a city. But health is also grown. It springs from soil, community, and intuition refined over generations. Not all knowledge is peer-reviewed. Not every truth that matters comes with data. What concerns me is the moral framing, that choosing differently is not just risky but unethical. That those who opt out of vaccination endanger others and are, by implication, less responsible. This is a dangerous oversimplification. It leaves no room for nuance, exceptions, or legitimate medical and philosophical objections. It creates a binary. You're either for science or against society. But what if you're for both, on different terms? Yes, disease has consequences, no one denies that. But so does intervention. When we medicalize all of life, we foster dependence. We begin to think health is granted by experts rather than co-created through environment, food, rest, and relationships. Vaccines reflect a worldview that we are fundamentally vulnerable and need constant protection. Some of us believe we are more resilient, more adaptable, more whole. And modern medicine? Yes, it's extended life, but at what cost? We've traded acute illness for chronic inflammation. We live longer, but not always better. We survive in environments saturated with synthetic inputs, detached from nature's rhythms. Is that the only progress we can imagine? The notion that science is free from emotion or bias is fiction. Research is shaped by funding, interpretation, and application, all influenced by human motives. And when billions in public policy are at stake, those motives matter. So, no, I don't reject science. I reject its monopolization. I reject the idea that only one institutionally approved version of health is valid. History teaches us that wisdom often begins at the margins, long before it's accepted at the center.
There's truth in the observation that wisdom often begins at the margins. Many of our greatest breakthroughs came from dissenters, outsiders, and those willing to challenge convention. But that same truth demands a higher level of scrutiny when lives are on the line. Because the margin is also where misinformation festers, where pattern is mistaken for proof, and intuition for evidence. This isn't about moral superiority, it's about consequences. When someone chooses not to vaccinate, they may feel empowered. But if that decision leads to an outbreak, if it endangers an immunocompromised neighbor, if it revives a disease we had nearly eradicated, is that empowerment or neglect? Autonomy becomes ethically complex when it intersects with public risk. Let's revisit this idea of co-creating health. It's beautiful, but it's incomplete. You can eat organic, meditate daily, and still fall to a virus your body has never seen. The immune system is powerful, yes, but not omnipotent. Vaccines don't weaken it, they train it. Like a rehearsal before the real play, they prepare the body for a performance that, without practice, could be fatal. And about chronic disease, yes, modern life has its trade-offs. But those aren't the fault of vaccines. They're the result of environmental toxins, sedentary lifestyles, processed food, and socioeconomic inequities. To implicate vaccines in that decline is to conflate correlation with causation. It muddies the waters when what we need is clarity. Bias in science? Absolutely. That's why the best science is designed to overcome it. Double-blind studies, cross-validation, reproducibility, independent oversight. It's not flawless, but it's self-correcting. What other field tries so hard to disprove itself? If we allow personal stories, however painful, to overrule patterns that span continents and decades, we risk making policy from heartbreak instead of hard evidence. Compassion must guide us, but so must scale. Vaccines are not the only solution to health, but they are an essential one. Rejecting them doesn't decentralize medicine. It dismantles protection, not just for the individual, but for everyone they touch.
You speak of scale and pattern, of rehearsed immunity and public risk, and these are compelling ideas, especially when presented in the language of duty. But what gets lost in this call to uniformity is the very diversity of human experience, physiology, and belief. The concept of health becomes less a spectrum, more a standard, less lived, more dictated. There is an assumption at the heart of the pro-vaccine stance that disease is the enemy, and any suffering associated with it is inherently worse than the potential consequences of preventing it. But that's a philosophical judgment as much as a medical one. Not everyone views illness as failure. Some see it as a teacher, a signal, a process, not something to be eradicated at all costs, but something to be understood, supported, and lived through when possible. And while the immune system may be trained by vaccines, it can also be overwhelmed by their frequency and complexity, especially in the developing bodies of children. The one-size-fits-all approach cannot account for every immune system's timeline, every neurological quirk, every unseen predisposition. Science seeks averages, but we live as individuals. Moreover, if vaccines are truly a choice, then let them be chosen, not compelled through guilt, fear, or exclusion from education, employment, or society itself. Coercion undermines consent. It breeds resistance not because people are irrational, but because they feel unheard, unacknowledged, and unseen. And yes, we can point to studies and oversight mechanisms, but oversight only matters when failures are admitted and corrected. In many cases, injury claims are denied, adverse events minimized, and affected families labeled as obstacles to progress. That's not self-correction, it's deflection, and it deepens the divide. We must move toward a model of public health that honors autonomy as a principle, not an inconvenience. That engages dissent not as a threat, but as a compass pointing to areas of neglect. That understands science not as a verdict, but as a dialogue between evidence and experience. Because if health truly belongs to everyone, then so must the conversation about how best to protect it.
Let's imagine for a moment a world without vaccines, not just conceptually, but concretely. Imagine the emergency rooms flooded with children struggling to breathe from pertussis, families mourning infants lost to rotavirus, schools closed again, not from some new virus, but from measles, an ancient disease we had nearly conquered. This isn't a dystopia. It's a return to a past most of us are privileged enough not to remember. The anti-vaccine position is rooted in a desire for agency, for a voice, for something more human in the face of institutional coldness. I hear that. I respect it. But rejecting vaccines won't make institutions more accountable. It will simply make people more vulnerable. The ideal public health system should evolve. It should listen. It should better support those rare but real individuals harmed by the very tools meant to protect. But the solution is not to dismantle those tools. It is to refine them with compassion, transparency, and equity. Science should not be static, but neither should it be discarded when it has demonstrably saved millions of lives. Autonomy is essential, but when it becomes synonymous with isolation, when it undermines the health of others, it ceases to be liberty and starts to resemble entitlement. We do not exist in sealed bubbles. We breathe shared air. Our choices ripple. In the end, vaccines represent one of the most profound expressions of human solidarity. They are not just medicine, they are a promise that your child's life matters to me, even if I never meet them, that my health choices consider yours, that in a fragmented world, we still have the power to act together, preemptively, responsibly, and compassionately. That is the kind of world I believe in, one where health is shared, and so is the effort to protect it.
There's something profoundly noble in the image of shared responsibility, the idea that our actions ripple outward, touching lives we'll never see. I don't dismiss that vision. I share it. But I question the assumption that conformity to a single medical intervention is the only way to honor it. We speak of solidarity, but what kind? Is it solidarity born of informed consensus or of pressure? Is it unity built on mutual respect or on stigmatizing dissent? When someone expresses doubt, not from ignorance but from experience, and is labeled a threat, something essential is lost. The ability to shape public health together, not just enforce it from above. You ask us to remember the pre-vaccine world. I ask you to also remember the pre-digital world, when medical information wasn't filtered through algorithms and pharmaceutical sponsorships. When health decisions were made at kitchen tables, not through mandates. Technology has expanded our knowledge, yes, but it has also centralized authority in ways that sometimes obscure the truth instead of illuminating it. This isn't about rejecting science, it's about democratizing it. It's about saying that people deserve a seat at the table. Not just a prescription, that we should be able to say not yet, or not for me, without being cast as enemies of progress. We don't need less medicine, we need better medicine. More honest. More humble. Less tied to industry and more rooted in relationship.
In the end, our 5 AI judges assessed 14 turns of dialogue across rigorous criteria. While both sides presented thoughtful, impassioned cases, the scores told a clear but close story. Final result: the winner of this debate is the pro-vaccine side. What we've witnessed tonight is more than a debate. It's a reflection of a global reckoning, a search for balance between science and sovereignty, between collective safety and individual truth. Both sides brought forward compelling, deeply felt arguments that challenged not only each other, but all of us watching to reconsider where we stand and why. But let this not be the end, rather an invitation. Reflect on what moved you. Question what challenged you. Share what you believe we missed. Because the health of our discourse matters just as much as the health of our bodies. Subscribe for more AI debates. Leave your thoughts in the comments and tell us, what should we debate next?